I was called the shame of the family at Sunday lunch. The next morning, my voice was on every radio station in town. The smell of barbecue ribs, roasted corn, and apple pie filled every corner of my mom's small house in Savannah, Georgia. It was December 2018, and the unseasonal heat had everyone gathered out on the porch under the old oak tree my grandfather planted over 50 years ago. But that Sunday, the heat inside was far more suffocating than anything outside. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 23 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the black sheep of the Carter family. While my older brother, Michael, 28, was everyone's pride, an engineering graduate from Georgia Tech and recently promoted at an energy company, I was constantly reminded that I wasn't cut out for anything serious and needed to face reality. What they never understood is that music runs in my veins. Ever since I was a kid, I sang, in the shower, in the yard, in the car, anywhere. My voice has always been my refuge, my scream, my shelter. But to my family, it was nothing more than noise. A complete waste of time. That Sunday, everyone was gathered around the rustic wooden table my dad had built years ago. My mom, Linda, always made sure the house was full and the table, overflowing with food. Around it sat my dad, Robert, my brother Michael with his girlfriend Amanda, my Aunt Susan, Uncle Jack, and my cousins Chris and Lily. The conversation revolved around everyone's accomplishments, while I pushed food around my plate, silently wishing I could disappear. Michael just got promoted to supervisor, my dad announced proudly, patting his eldest on the back. He's making almost $6,000 a month now. Applause. Smiles. Toasts. Michael smiled with that look of someone who knows he's the perfect child. It's always been that way. He got Mom's light eyes and easy smile, while I took after Dad's strong features. But that was just the beginning of our differences. And you, Emily? Aunt Susan asked, crossing her arms and raising a judgmental eyebrow. Still chasing that dream of being a singer? Silence fell like a crushing weight over the table. My heart raced. I knew this moment was coming. It always came. That inevitable point in the meal where I became the center of everyone's disappointment. She's working part-time at Macy's, my mom answered, her voice laced with a mix of embarrassment and resignation. And still wasting money on those singing lessons. It was true. I worked 3 days a week at the downtown Macy's, earning just above minimum wage, and spent a good chunk of it on voice lessons with Mr. Clark, a retired musician who had once played with some pretty big country bands back in the 80s. Emily, my dad started, adjusting his glasses, you're 23 now. It's high time you stopped dreaming and got your life together. Look at your brother. He studied, graduated, and now he's building a solid future. Dad. I'm trying, I began, but Aunt Susan cut me off. Trying what, honey? To get famous? You think you're the next Carrie Underwood, she scoffed, and the others chuckled along. Wake up, girl. Singing doesn't pay the bills. You should be getting a real job. Or at least find yourself a decent husband. My eyes started to burn, but I held it back. I'd heard this speech 1,000 times. But that day, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was years of swallowing it all. Or maybe I just had enough. I have talent, I whispered, staring down at my plate. My teacher says my voice has commercial potential. Michael burst out laughing, almost spitting his beer. Commercial potential, he echoed mockingly. Emily, for God's sake. Of course he's gonna say that. That's how those teachers make money, by filling your head with dreams. Michael's right, Amanda chimed in, tucking a perfectly bleached blonde strand behind her ear. My cousin sang too, took some courses, now she's working at an Amazon warehouse. That's life. You gotta be realistic. Uncle Jack, who had been quiet until then, decided to add his 2 cents. Emily, let me give you some advice. Dreaming's cute, but people who dream too much wake up with nothing. You should go take a course, apply for a city job, get something stable. Every word hit like a hammer to my chest. And just when I thought it couldn't hurt more, the final blow came. My mom dropped her napkin on the table, crossed her arms, and stared at me with those cold eyes I'll never forget. "Emily, it's time to grow up," she said, sharp and unforgiving. "You're living in a fantasy. You are a shame to this family. While everyone here is fighting to build something, you're just throwing your life away." The world stopped. Completely. The sound of silverware clinking faded, no one moved. Even the noise of the TV in the living room seemed to vanish. Everyone stared, some with pity, others with judgment. But no one, not a single person, stood up for me. Shame of the family. Those 4 words spun in my head like a punch that just wouldn't stop landing. 23 years of my life reduced to one brutal sentence, spoken by the woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally. I felt an ache in my chest so real, it was almost physical. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. For a moment, I truly thought I might collapse right there, in front of everyone. "Linda, you didn't have to be so harsh," my dad muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. It was just protocol. An empty gesture. "No, Robert." Someone had to say it, my mom snapped, her hands slapping the table. It needed to be said. I stood up slowly, like I was moving underwater. My legs trembled but held me. I scanned every face around that table, my dad, eyes downcast, Aunt Susan, scrolling on her phone like nothing happened, my brother whispering some joke to Amanda, my cousins, visibly uncomfortable, but silent. "All right," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Message received. I walked out of the dining room, past the kitchen, where my 78-year-old grandma Margaret was washing dishes, oblivious to everything. She had always been my safe place, my soft spot. But right then, she was too hard of hearing, or maybe just too tired, to have caught any of it. And honestly, I didn't have the strength to explain. I went to my room, a small space I shared with a bookshelf packed with used books I'd picked up from a little secondhand store near work. On the walls, I had taped magazine clippings of singers I admired, Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, Casey Musgraves. They were my inspiration, women who came from simple families and had conquered the entire country with their voices. I sat on my twin bed, which took up half the room, and finally allowed the tears to fall freely. I cried for hours, until there was nothing left inside me but a hollow emptiness and a pain that felt endless. But in that moment of total despair, something inside me shifted. It was like the humiliation had burned away every ounce of fear and insecurity that had ever held me back from chasing my dreams. For the first time in my life, I felt a clean, sharp kind of anger, not the destructive kind, but the kind that transforms. I grabbed my phone, a worn-out Samsung J5 that I'd bought with my own money, and started searching for talent contests, radio shows that accepted demos, any opportunity that could give me a chance to show my voice to the world. That night, while the whole family sat in the living room watching 60 Minutes, I was in my room plotting my revenge. Not a cruel or destructive revenge, but the most powerful one of all, success. The kind no one saw coming, the kind no one believed was possible. I was going to prove to every single person at that table that they were dead wrong about me. I was going to show them that the shame of the family would become the greatest pride they'd ever known. More importantly, I was going to do it for me, for the little girl who had always known there was something special inside her, even when the whole world told her otherwise. Monday morning felt different. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., like always, to get to work by 8. But this time, there was steel running through my veins. I showered, ate the toast with butter my mom had left on the kitchen table, and walked out the door without exchanging a single word with anyone. On the crowded bus headed downtown, while the sound of morning traffic hummed through the fogged-up windows, I made a silent promise to myself, within a year, 2 at most, I was going to come back home with a victory so big, no one would ever question my talent again. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew it was going to happen. For the first time in my life, my dream wasn't just a vague wish, it was an inevitable destiny that I had the power to reach. Monday, December 17, 2018, was the day my silent transformation began. I arrived at Rosa's boutique with a completely different energy, a determination I had never felt before. Rosa, a 65-year-old Italian woman with silver hair always tied up in a neat bun, noticed the change right away. "Emily, cara mia, you look different today," she said as we unpacked the new stock of clothes. "Your eyes, they're shining in a strange way." Rosa had always been more than just a boss to me. She had immigrated from Italy back in the 70s, built her life from scratch here in Savannah, and always treated me with the kind of respect my own family never did. Her shop was small but well located on Broughton Street, catering mostly to middle-class women looking for stylish clothes without the outrageous price tags. "Ms. Rosa," I said, folding a floral dress, choosing my words carefully, "do you happen to know anyone in the music scene around here? Any radio stations, producers, anyone who might give me a shot?" She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with those piercing blue eyes that always felt like they could see straight into someone's soul. "Are you serious about this singing thing?" "More serious than I've ever been about anything in my life." Rosa sighed, leaning on the counter. She stood there for a moment, like she was weighing whether or not to get involved. Finally, she said, "My son-in-law, Mark, works over at WSB Radio. He's been a sound technician there for over 10 years. I can talk to him. But you've got to be sure about what you want, Emily. Opportunities like this, they come once." My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. WSB Radio was one of the biggest stations in the state, with listeners all across Georgia. It was exactly the kind of chance I needed. "I'm sure," I said without even blinking. "More sure than I've ever been." That afternoon, right after work, I went straight to Mr. Clark's house. He lived in a modest home in the Midtown neighborhood, an old two-story with a tiny recording studio set up in the basement. He was a 58-year-old man with silver hair who used to play guitar for a band called Southern Storm back in the 80s, a band that once played for crowds of over 10,000 people. "Mr. Clark," I said as soon as I stepped into the studio, surrounded by soundproof foam and old but well-maintained equipment, "I need to record a demo. The best we can possibly make." He raised an eyebrow. In the 8 months I'd been taking lessons with him, he'd seen my growth, but he'd never seen this kind of fire in me before. "Something happen?" he asked, adjusting the knobs on his mixer. I told him everything. About Sunday's lunch. About the words my mother had thrown at me. About the opportunity Ms. Rosa had just offered. And as I spoke, I could still feel the sting of those words, but now, instead of breaking me, they fueled me. "I get it," Mr. Clark nodded after listening to it all. "Here's what we'll do. This week, we'll work on 3 songs. 1 country, 1 pop ballad, and 1 classic soul track. You'll show versatility, technique, and heart. Then Saturday, we record." The next 5 days were the most intense of my life so far. I woke up at 5:30, worked from 8 to 2 at the boutique, grabbed a quick sandwich for lunch, and headed straight to Mr. Clark's house, where we rehearsed until 8 p.m. every night. I'd come home exhausted, eat dinner quietly while my family kept ignoring me like I was invisible, and fall asleep thinking about breathing techniques, vocal runs, and how to nail every note perfectly. We picked 3 songs that highlighted different sides of my voice: Before He Cheats, by Carrie Underwood, To Show Power and Grit, Piece by Piece, by Kelly Clarkson, to show emotion and vulnerability, and I Will Always Love You, by Whitney Houston, to show range and vocal mastery. On Saturday, December 22nd, we arrived at the studio at 8 a.m. I was nervous, but the good kind of nervous. The kind that athletes feel right before the big game. Mr. Clark had called in his friend Robert, a retired sound engineer, to help us make the recording as professional as possible. "Emily," Mr. Clark said before we started, "you've got something special. It's not just about technique, it's the soul in your voice. Today, I want you to pour every ounce of what you're feeling into these songs. Let the pain become power. The first track was Before He Cheats. As I belted out, right now, he's probably slow dancing with a bleach blonde tramp, I felt like I was releasing every ounce of frustration from the past week. My voice came out strong, raw, filled with fire, and when I finished, I looked up and saw tears in Mr. Clark's eyes. "Holy hell," Robert muttered from behind the mixing board. "This girl's got something real." The second song, Piece by Piece, required a completely different approach. It needed more subtlety, more interpretation. As I sang, piece by piece, he restored my faith that a man can be kind and a father could stay. I thought about my own family, the cycle of broken expectations, the patterns that needed to be shattered. The third song was the most challenging. I Will Always Love You demanded extreme vocal technique, and I had never dared to attempt the highest notes from the original. But that day, fueled by every bit of emotion surging through me, I reached notes I didn't even know were possible for me. By the time we finished recording around 2 p.m., I was physically drained but emotionally reborn. Robert mastered the 3 tracks right then and there, and I walked out with a CD that captured the very best of my voice up to that moment. On Monday, Ms. Rosa gave me the news I'd been dreaming of. Her son-in-law, Mark, had managed to set up an audition for me at WSB Radio on Thursday, December 27th, at 3 p.m. It would be with Claudio Anderson, the station's artistic director, a man well known for discovering local talent across Georgia. The 3 days leading up to the audition were an emotional roller coaster. During the day, I did my best to act normal at work and at home, but inside, I was a storm of anxiety, anticipation, and sheer determination. My family kept treating me like furniture, as if I were just part of the house. My mom only spoke to me when necessary, my dad mumbled a half-hearted good morning and good night, and my brother Michael acted like I didn't exist. On Wednesday night, my grandma Margaret, 78 years old, quietly stepped into my room. She was the only person in the family who still treated me with love, even though her hearing wasn't what it used to be. "Emily, sweetheart," she said, sitting down slowly on my bed, "I don't know what happened last Sunday, but I can see you've been hurting. I just want you to know. I've always believed in you." Her words were like medicine on a wound that had been bleeding for far too long. I told her everything, the audition, the dream, the fight I was in. She held my hand in her weathered, gentle fingers and listened as if every word was precious. "Baby girl," she said softly when I finished, "I may be old and half-deaf, but I still know talent when I hear it. I saw something special in you when you were just a little girl singing in the backyard. Now go out there and show the world exactly who you are." On Thursday, December 27, 2018, I woke up at 5 a.m., even though it was my day off from the boutique. I took a long shower, picked out my best outfit, a crisp white blouse and black slacks I'd bought on clearance at Ms. Rosa's shop, and left home at 1:30 to get there early. WSB Radio was inside a sleek, modern building downtown. As soon as I stepped into the lobby, my throat went dry from nerves. The receptionist, a friendly young woman, directed me to the waiting room, where the walls were covered in posters of famous artists who had passed through those halls. At 3:15, Claudio Anderson called me into his office. He was a man in his mid-40s, with brown hair streaked with silver, wearing a navy polo and jeans. His office was lined with awards, framed photos of him with famous musicians, and shelves full of high-end audio equipment. "So, you're Emily, the girl Mark's been raving about," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "He says you've got a special voice, but you know, people say that to me every day." "Yes, sir," I replied, swallowing my nerves. "But I hope my voice can speak for itself." He chuckled. "Good answer. Let's hear it, then." I slipped the CD into his stereo and started with Before He Cheats. From the very first note, I saw his expression shift. He leaned forward in his chair, eyes locked on nothing but the sound. When the first song ended, he didn't say a word, just motioned for me to play the next. Piece by Piece hit even harder. Halfway through, I noticed he closed his eyes, listening, not just hearing, but feeling the music. And when I Will Always Love You hit the final high notes, those impossible, skyscraping notes. I watched him stand up from his chair, hands on his hips, staring at the speakers like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. When the third track faded out, silence hung in the air. He sat there for a few seconds, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Emily," he finally said, his voice steady but clearly impressed, "I've worked in this radio station for 15 years, and I don't say this often, but it's rare I hear a voice like yours. You've got the technique, sure. But more importantly, you've got soul." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I'm going to make you an offer," he continued. "We have a show that airs Monday through Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. called Afternoon Vibes. It's hosted by Fernanda Lewis, one of our most experienced DJs. She's been looking for someone to feature in a weekly segment called The Voice of the Week. It's for up-and-coming singers to perform live on air." I could barely breathe. "If you're in," Claudio said, "you'd come in every Thursday to sing a song live in the studio. The show averages about 200,000 listeners across Georgia." "I'm in," I said, cutting him off before he could even finish explaining. He laughed. "I haven't even told you about the pay yet." "It doesn't matter," I said, and I meant it. "I'd do it for free." "Well, it's not free. We pay $300 per appearance. And if this goes well, we can talk about something bigger." $300 every Thursday meant an extra $1,200 a month, more than my entire salary at Rose's boutique. But the money was the least important part. I was about to have a platform where hundreds of thousands of people could hear my voice every single week. "Your first appearance will be next Thursday, January 3rd, Claudio said. "Fernanda will call you tomorrow to go over the details." I walked out of WSB Radio floating. I took the bus home, but the ride felt like it lasted just a few minutes. My mind was spinning with plans, dreams, and possibilities that just a week ago had felt completely out of reach. When I got home, my family was sitting in the living room watching TV. For a second, I thought about telling them, sharing the news, letting them in on my joy. But then I remembered the words, "shame of the family," and decided, no. This moment was mine. I'd keep it to myself a little longer. I went to my room, sat on the bed, and for the first time since that awful Sunday lunch, I smiled. Really smiled. In less than a week, I'd landed an opportunity that could change everything. I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Clark. "Mr. Clark." "I did it," I said the second he picked up. "Did what?" "The audition. I nailed it. I'm going to be on the radio. Every Thursday. Live. Singing for 200,000 people." There was silence on the line. Then, his voice, thick with emotion, "Emily. I knew you could do it. I've known it since the very first lesson. Now the real work begins." That night, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling of my tiny room, I made another silent promise to myself. I was going to take this opportunity and grow so big, shine so bright, that no one would ever dare call me the shame of this family again. I was going to turn that pain into fuel and climb higher than any of them ever dreamed was possible. The sweetest revenge was just beginning, the kind built note by note, show by show, dream by dream. Thursday, January 3rd, 2019, dawned with a typical Savannah winter rain, heavy, quick, and refreshing. I woke up at 5 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual, with a mix of nerves and excitement running wild through my veins. Today was the day. My first live performance on Afternoon Vibes at WSB Radio. And I knew, my life was never going to be the same again. I took a long shower, carefully choosing my outfit, the same white blouse and black slacks I'd worn to the audition, which had now become my lucky outfit, and headed downstairs for breakfast. My family was in the kitchen, going through their usual morning routine, my dad reading the Savannah morning news, my mom prepping dinner, and my brother Michael grumbling about the traffic before heading to work. "I'll be home a little late today," I announced casually, pouring coffee into the porcelain mug my parents had received as a wedding gift years ago. Why? My mom asked, not looking up from the pan where she was sautéing vegetables. I've got a few things to take care of. No one asked what those things were. The indifference my family had shown me since that Sunday lunch had become almost tangible. It was as if I were a ghost living in the same house as them. I left the house at 7:30 and headed to Rose's boutique with a completely different kind of energy. Every customer I greeted, every shirt I folded, every smile I offered carried a buzz of excitement that seemed to radiate straight from my core. Oggi sei diversa, Emily, Ms. Rosa said around 11 a.m., switching into her usual Italian-English blend whenever she got emotional. Hai un'energia speciale. Today's a special day, Ms. Rosa, I replied, organizing the summer clothes that had just arrived from the supplier. Ah, è vero. Oggi è il tuo debutto alla radio, she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Mark called me last night. He's molto emozionato about your performance. The hours crawled until 2 p.m., when I left the boutique and headed straight to WSB Radio. I arrived at 2:30, exactly 1 hour before the show started, just like I had arranged with Fernanda Lewis, the host. Fernanda was a woman in her early 40s, with short brown hair, a warm smile, and that familiar voice I'd been hearing on the radio for years. She was one of the most respected broadcasters in Savannah, known for her kindness and professionalism. The moment she welcomed me into the studio, her easygoing warmth helped melt some of my nerves. So you're Emily, the girl Claudio won't stop talking about, she said, giving me a big, genuine hug. He says your voice gives people chills. I can't wait to hear it. The studio was smaller than I expected but packed with top-notch equipment. There were 2 soundproof booths, one for the hosts and another for performances. Black acoustic foam covered the walls, and a large glass panel separated the rooms. Let's do a quick sound check first, Fernanda explained, guiding me to the recording booth. Which song are we doing today? Before He Cheats, I replied, adjusting the headphones she handed me. During the check, I sang a few verses while Daniel, the sound technician, worked the levels. I watched Fernanda through the glass as her expression shifted from polite professionalism to genuine surprise. Oh my God, Emily, she said through the intercom when I finished. Claudio wasn't exaggerating. You really do have something. At exactly 4 p.m., Afternoon Vibes went live. Fernanda opened the show with her signature broadcaster voice. Good afternoon, Georgia. This is Fernanda Lewis with another edition of Afternoon Vibes, bringing you the best in national and international music to brighten your day. And today, we have a very special debut in our Voice of the Week segment. My heart felt like it was trying to break free from my chest. Fernanda glanced at me through the glass with a reassuring smile, motioning for me to relax. Joining me in the studio is Emily Carter, 23 years old, a young talent right here from Savannah, Georgia, who's about to show us why American music keeps getting stronger with every new voice. Emily, tell our listeners a little about yourself. She gestured, and I grabbed the mic with trembling hands. Good afternoon, everyone, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 23, I work at a clothing store downtown, and I've always dreamed of becoming a professional singer. And today, you're making that dream a reality, Fernanda said. What song did you choose for your debut? I chose Before He Cheats because it's a song about standing up for yourself, about not letting anyone walk all over you, and that means a lot to me right now. Perfect choice. So let's hear Emily Carter performing Before He Cheats live here at WSB Radio. The backing track kicked in through my headphones. For a split second, I thought I might faint. 200,000 people were listening. 200,000 strangers who didn't know me, didn't have any prejudices against me, who would judge me for one thing only, my voice. And the moment my cue came, something magical happened. All the anxiety transformed into pure musical emotion. Right now, he's probably slow dancing with a bleach blonde tramp, the words poured out, loaded with every ounce of pain, hope, and determination I'd carried for years. I sang thinking about that Sunday lunch. About the words, shame of the family. About my lonely fight to get here. Every note was a declaration of freedom. Every line was proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I deserved to be heard. When I hit the chorus, maybe next time he'll think before he cheats, my voice exploded with a power that even surprised me. Through the glass, I saw Fernanda with her eyes wide open, and Daniel, the sound tech, gave me a thumbs up. The song lasted a little over 3 minutes, but those were the most important 3 minutes of my life. When I finished, the silence in the studio felt like it stretched forever. Guys. I've got chills, Fernanda finally said, coming back on air. Emily Carter just blessed us with a stunning rendition of Before He Cheats. Folks, send us your messages, hit us up on social media. I have no doubt you were as blown away as I was. In the minutes that followed, while Fernanda played other songs and chatted with listeners, the radio's phone lines lit up like fireworks. Daniel showed me the screen. Over 50 text messages had already come in, full of praise for my performance. Emily, you crushed it, Fernanda said during a commercial break. It's been a long time since I've seen a response like this from our listeners. You have something really special. By 6 p.m., when the show wrapped up, I felt like I'd run a marathon. I was physically exhausted, but emotionally, I was soaring. Claudio Anderson walked into the studio grinning from ear to ear. Emily, in 2 hours, we've received over 200 messages about you, he said, showing me a printout full of listener comments. That's an absolute record for a debut on Voice of the Week. Some of the messages nearly brought me to tears. This girl's voice touches the soul. It's been ages since I've heard someone sing with this much emotion. Please bring her back next week. Emily, Claudio said, I want to make you an offer. Instead of just Thursdays, how about we start with twice a week? Tuesdays and Thursdays. Same time, same format. Doubling my appearances meant doubling the pay, $400 a month just from the radio. That was more than double what I made working full-time at Rose's boutique. Of course, I accept, I said without a second of hesitation. I walked out of WSB Radio floating on air. I caught the bus home with a smile I couldn't wipe off my face. The entire ride, I kept wondering if any of the other passengers had heard me on the radio, if they realized that the ordinary girl sitting quietly in the back was the same person who had just moved 200,000 people 2 hours earlier. When I got home, around 7:30 p.m., my family was in the living room watching the evening news. I slipped in quietly and headed straight to the kitchen, where Grandma Margaret was brewing a pot of chamomile tea. Hey, Grandma, I said, kissing her cheek. Well, hey there, sweetheart. You're glowing today. Something good happen? Grandma Margaret had always been the most intuitive person in our family. Even with her hearing fading, she could sense emotional shifts no one else ever noticed. Something very good happened, Grandma. I told her everything, about my performance on the radio, the flood of listener reactions, and the offer to double my appearances. She held my hands in hers, her skin soft and worn, listening with her full heart. I always knew, baby girl, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I always knew you had a gift. Your grandma may be half deaf, but she's not deaf to music. The following Tuesday, January 8th, I had my second appearance on the show. This time I sang Piece by Piece by Kelly Clarkson, a song that demanded more interpretation, more storytelling than sheer vocal power. The response was even bigger than the first time. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a whirlwind routine that consumed me, but in the best way possible. Mornings at Rose's boutique, afternoons studying with Mr. Clark, and live performances at WSB Radio every Tuesday and Thursday. Saturdays were dedicated to rehearsing next week's set list. Then, in February, something completely unexpected happened. Claudio Anderson called me into his office. Emily, you become a phenomenon, he said, sliding a stack of audience charts across his desk. On the days you perform, our ratings jump by 30%. I've never seen anything like it. He paused, organizing some papers before looking back at me. I have an offer that could change your life forever, he continued. WSB Radio has a partnership with Skyline Records, a regional label under the umbrella of a national recording company. They want to meet you. My heart nearly stopped. Skyline Records was one of the biggest labels in the region, responsible for launching several major artists into the national spotlight. They've been listening to your performances on our show, Claudio explained, and they're interested in auditioning you for a potential contract, an EP with 4 tracks, distributed nationwide. In the days that followed, everything moved at lightning speed. I was invited to audition at Skyline's headquarters, located in a sleek office building downtown in Atlanta. There, I performed for Marcus Rivera, the label's artistic director, and his team. The audition lasted 2 hours. I sang 8 different songs, showcasing every side of my voice: pop, country, ballads, soul. When I finished, Marcus looked me in the eye and said something that would change my life forever. "Emily, we'd like to offer you a contract to record an EP. I can't promise you'll be famous overnight, but I can promise that we'll give you everything you need to build a real career in music." The contract included a $15,000 advance plus royalties from sales and airplay. It was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. I signed the contract on February 20, 2019, exactly 2 months after that fateful Sunday lunch that had changed my life's course. Walking out of Skyline Records with that contract in my hands, I stopped on the sidewalk, and for the first time in weeks, I cried. But this time, they were tears of joy. Tears of victory. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Clark. "Mr. Clark. I did it. I signed with a record label." Silence on the other end. Then, "Emily. I am so proud of you. So proud. You deserve every bit of this. Every bit." That night, as I walked into my house with the contract tucked safely in my bag, my family was exactly where they always were, on the couch, watching TV, barely acknowledging me. But this time, I walked straight upstairs, holding a secret that was about to become public, a secret that would forever change the dynamic in this house. I sat on my bed, looked up at the magazine cutouts on my wall, Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, Casey Musgraves, and smiled. In just 2 months, I had gone from shame of the family to an artist with a national recording contract. The sweetest revenge was unfolding right in front of me: success. Success they never believed was possible, built note by note, show by show, dream by dream. And the best part? It was only just beginning. March 2019 was a roller coaster of emotions and transformations. With the Skyline Records contract signed, my life kicked into a gear I never imagined possible. The first $15,000 hit my bank account on March 1st, and for the first time in my life, I saw 5 digits in my balance. The first thing I did was pay off all my overdue lessons with Mr. Clark, and even prepaid a few months in advance. The man who believed in me when nobody else did deserved to know his faith had been rewarded. "Emily, you didn't have to do this," he said, his voice thick with emotion as I handed him the money. "I would have waited however long you needed. Mr. Clark, you invested in me when I was just a girl with an impossible dream. Now it's my turn to invest in us." The EP recording was scheduled to begin on March 15 at Skyline Studio in Los Angeles. It would be my first flight, my first time in California, and my very first experience in a real, professional studio. Meanwhile, my appearances on WSB Radio had become an event that listeners eagerly anticipated. Fernanda Lewis always kicked it off with the same enthusiastic announcement: "It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Emily Carter is here for another incredible live performance." The messages kept pouring in at record numbers. Some were so moving, they made me cry. "Emily, your voice helped me get through my depression. My 15-year-old daughter listens to you religiously and says she wants to be a singer just like you. You represent all of us women fighting for our dreams." At home, my family continued their usual routine of cold indifference. I left early, came home late, ate dinner in silence, and headed upstairs. The difference now was that I carried a secret so powerful it felt radioactive. In just a few weeks, the whole country was going to know my name. On March 12th, 3 days before my flight to LA, I decided to tell Ms. Rosa about the record deal. She deserved to know. After all, none of this would have happened without her. Madonna mia, she gasped, clutching her chest. I always knew you were speciale, but a record deal. Mark will be so proud, he started tutto questo. Ms. Rosa, I want to make you an offer, I said, organizing a rack of clothes. When my music career really takes off, I want you to be my manager here in Savannah. You know business, you have experience, and you've always believed in me. Her blue eyes welled with tears. Emily, it would be an honor to work with you. But first, you go out there and conquer the world. On March 15th, I boarded the 7:30 a.m. flight from Savannah to Los Angeles. It was my very first time on a plane, and as I watched the city shrink beneath me through the window, I felt it in my bones. I wasn't just flying to LA. I was flying straight toward my destiny. When I landed in Los Angeles, I was greeted by Carla Mendez, a 35-year-old music producer who would be in charge of directing my EP. She was standing at LAX holding a sign with my name on it. On the drive to my hotel in downtown LA, she explained how the next 5 days would unfold. Emily, you're going to be working with some of the best musicians and producers in the country, she said as we navigated through LA's endless traffic. Rafael Sanchez, the producer for your EP, has worked with some of the biggest names, Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, Casey Musgraves. You're in great hands. Skyline Record Studios were in an impressive building in the heart of Silver Lake. When I stepped into the main studio, I was completely blown away by the level of sophistication. It felt like stepping onto a spaceship for musicians, massive soundboards, monitors everywhere, and perfect acoustics. Rafael Sanchez was a man in his mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, dark sunglasses even indoors, and an air of absolute professionalism. He had produced some of the biggest hits in country and pop over the past decade. So, you're the Emily that's been shaking up Georgia, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Let's see if that voice lives up to the hype. We did a vocal test with Before He Cheats, the song that had basically become my signature. When I finished, Rafael pulled off his sunglasses and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Carla, you were right, he said, turning to the producer. This girl's got something you can't teach in any conservatory. She's got soul. The next 5 days were a masterclass in musical professionalism. We recorded 4 tracks for the EP, Before He Cheats, the definitive version that had become my anthem, Broken Hearted, an original song written just for me, Tears of Joy, a song about overcoming hardship, and Warrior, a fierce anthem of female empowerment. Every day in the studio was like stepping into a dream. The musicians working with me had played alongside some of the biggest names in the industry. The drummer had toured with Carrie Underwood, the guitarist was a session player for Keith Urban, and the keyboardist had performed with Kelsey Ballerini. Emily, you have an insane ability to channel the emotion of a song, Rafael said on the 3rd day. I've worked with technically perfect singers who couldn't deliver even 10% of the emotion you put into every note. But then, something happened that would change everything. Marcus Rivera, the director of Skyline Records, called Rafael with a bombshell announcement. Emily's being invited to perform on the Sunday show with Jimmy Carson, Marcus said over speakerphone. It'll air on Sunday, April 7th, national television. Over 20 million viewers. My heart nearly stopped. The Sunday show was one of the most watched programs in the country. Artists who performed there often saw their careers skyrocket overnight. Marcus, are you sure they mean Emily? Rafael asked. Absolutely. They heard her performances on WSB radio through our press office, and Jimmy himself approved it. They want her to perform Before He Cheats. I flew back to Savannah on March 20th with my EP finished and a national TV appearance locked in. Staring out the plane window at the clouds, I thought about how my life had completely transformed in just 3 months. In the days that followed, the news about my appearance started spreading locally. The Savannah Morning News published a feature, local girl heads to national TV, Emily Carter to represent Georgia on the Sunday show. WSB Radio launched a campaign urging listeners to tune in. At home, my family carried on like nothing was happening. I walked up and down those stairs, ate dinner in silence, and not a single one of them had any idea that in 2 weeks I'd be singing on national TV for 20 million people. On Friday, April 5th, 2 days before the show, I decided to tell Grandma Margaret everything. She was out in the backyard watering her plants when I walked up to her. "Grandma, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's going on?" I told her about the record deal, the EP I recorded in LA, and the invitation to perform on the Sunday show. She listened quietly, tears streaming down her face. "Emily, my precious girl," she said, pulling me into a hug, "I always knew God had something special planned for you. And on Sunday, while you're on TV, your grandma's gonna be right here, cheering and praying." On Saturday, April 6th, I flew back to LA, this time for the biggest performance of my life. The taping would be Sunday morning, set to air that same afternoon. At the CBS studios in Hollywood, the production crew treated me like I was already a star. I had my own dressing room, a professional makeup artist, a wardrobe stylist, the full VIP treatment I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd experience. Jimmy Carson himself came to greet me before the taping. He was charming, warm, and made me feel instantly at ease. "Emily, I heard your recordings, and I was blown away," he said, smiling. "There's something truly special about you. Today, the whole country's gonna see it." The taping started at 10 a.m. As I stepped onto that massive stage, a live audience of 300 stared at me, waiting. Cameras pointed from every direction. Lights flashed. Everything felt surreal and terrifying, and exhilarating. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jimmy announced, "now it's time to meet a young talent who's been making waves in Georgia. Emily Carter, 23 years old, performing Before He Cheats." The music started. And the moment I opened my mouth, something magical happened. It was as if every second of preparation, every humiliation, every late-night practice session had led me here, to this exact moment. I sang for my family, who never believed in me. I sang for Grandma Margaret, who always did. I sang for Mr. Clark, who invested in my talent. I sang for Ms. Rosa, who gave me my first real chance. I sang for every listener on WSB Radio who had cheered me on. But more than anything, I sang for that 23-year-old girl who had once been called the shame of the family during a Sunday lunch, and who decided to turn that pain into the fuel that would take her to the top. When I hit the final note, the audience erupted. I saw people crying. I saw huge, emotional smiles. I saw real, genuine approval. Jimmy walked up to me with tears in his eyes. "America, you've just met a star," he said, pulling me into a hug. Emily Carter. Remember that name. The show aired at 2 p.m. on Sunday, April 7, 2019, to an audience of over 22 million people across the country. In just 3.5 minutes, my voice had entered homes from coast to coast. As the show aired, I was sitting at LAX, waiting for my flight back to Savannah. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls from Mr. Clark, Ms. Rosa, radio friends, and even people I didn't know had my number. But the most important call came at 2:35 p.m., from a number I knew by heart. My parents' house. "Hello? Emily?" It was my mom. But there was something in her voice I hadn't heard in a very long time, something real. Something like pride. "Yeah, Mom. Sweetheart, we just saw you on TV." There was silence on the other end. I could hear background noise, my family's voices, the TV still playing, the sounds of our house, suddenly different. Suddenly, awake. "Emily," my mother continued, her voice trembling, "I need to ask you for forgiveness. Forgive me for all the times I didn't believe in you, for all the harsh words, for calling you those terrible things." Tears streamed down my face, right there in the middle of the crowded airport. Sweetheart, you are the greatest pride of this family. You always have been. I was just too blind to see it. Mom, I managed to say between sobs. We're all here, me, your dad, Michael, even the neighbors came over to watch. We're all crying, Emily. All of us. We're so proud of you. When I hung up, I sat there for several minutes, crying, tears of relief, forgiveness, and triumph. The girl who had walked out of that house 3 months earlier, humiliated and broken, was coming home as the artist the entire country had just watched and applauded. My flight to Savannah was delayed, so I didn't get home until around 10 p.m. When I opened the door, my whole family was there waiting. My dad, my mom, my brother Michael, Aunt Susan, Uncle Jack, my cousins Chris and Lily, and Grandma Margaret sitting right in the middle of all of them. As soon as they saw me, everyone stood. My dad was the first to speak. Emily. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it. My brother Michael walked up with tears in his eyes. Sis. I'm so sorry for every time I made fun of your dreams. Today I realized, you are so much bigger than any of us ever imagined. Aunt Susan, the same one who once asked if I thought I was Carrie Underwood, hugged me tight. Emily, you're better than Carrie. You're one of a kind. But it was my mother's embrace that sealed my redemption. She held me like she hadn't since I was a child, whispering in my ear. My daughter, you were never the shame of this family. You've always been our greatest glory. I was just too blind to see it. That night, sitting at the same table where I'd been humiliated just 3 months earlier, my family listened, truly listened, as I told them everything. The radio audition, the record deal, the recording sessions in LA, and everything that was coming next. Emily, my dad said, from now on, this family is behind you. We are your family. And family protects family. The weeks that followed turned my life upside down, in the best way possible. My EP, Before He Cheats, launched nationally and climbed the charts. I got invitations for shows across the country, brand sponsorships, magazine covers, and appearances on major TV shows. 6 months after my appearance on the Sunday show, in October 2019, I got the call that would be the ultimate stamp on my redemption, an invitation to be a judge on The Voice America, the biggest talent show in the country. On the day of my first taping as a judge, I wore a royal blue dress custom made by a famous designer, shoes that cost more than my old monthly paycheck, and jewelry on loan from one of the top jewelers in the world. As I stepped onto the set, with Ultra HD cameras pointed at me, a multi-million-dollar production buzzing around, I thought about that 23-year-old girl who had once been called the shame of the family at a Sunday lunch. That girl had become a woman with the power to change other artists' lives, with the push of a button. The same voice that was once dismissed, mocked, and ignored, was now a national standard. A voice that now had the authority to spot talent, and lift it. During the opening of the show, when the announcer boomed, Emily Carter, America's breakout star of 2019, and your newest judge on The Voice, I knew, my transformation was complete. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about redemption. It was about proving that dreams that once seemed impossible, could become reality when powered by unstoppable determination. It was about turning pain into fuel, humiliation into motivation, rejection into recognition. Today, 2 years after that Sunday lunch that nearly broke me, I'm one of the most respected artists in the country. My debut album, Heart Evidence, sold over 500,000 copies and was certified gold. My tour calendar is fully booked through the end of 2021. I lead a team of 15 professionals, and I bought my family a mansion in Beverly Hills. Yes, my family. The same family that once called me a shame, now runs my career. My mom, Linda, became my personal manager and discovered a natural talent for business. My dad, Robert, quit his job to manage my finances and investments. My brother Michael left his engineering career to become my artistic director, using his technical skills to navigate the complexities of the music industry. But the most beautiful transformation was Grandma Margaret. At 80 years old, she became the mascot of my career, appearing in music videos, interviews, and major events. Her toothless smile and wise words captured America's heart. She always says in interviews, "I always knew my granddaughter was special. I was just waiting for the world to figure it out." Mr. Clark, my first music teacher, is now my vocal director for every project. I built a professional studio at his home, and he's become one of the most sought-after vocal coaches in the country. "Emily's not just my student," he says, "she's my masterpiece." Ms. Rosa closed her little boutique and opened a talent agency dedicated to finding new singers. Using her business experience and sharp intuition, she's already discovered 3 artists who've gone national. "Emily mi ha insegnato che I sogni sono possibili," she proudly says in her thick Italian accent. Claudio Anderson from WSB Radio became my media consultant. He always reminds people of that first audition. "I knew from the first note that Emily was special, but even I had no idea she'd be this big." Fernanda Lewis still hosts Afternoon Vibes, but now the show has a national broadcast. She always tells the story of my discovery on air. "It was in this very studio that America first heard Emily Carter." Rafael Sanchez, the producer who recorded my first EP, became my exclusive producer. Together, we developed a unique sound that blends classic country with modern pop. Emily has that rare ability to make commercial music, without losing her soul, he explains whenever someone asks about our creative process. In December 2019, exactly 1 year after that fateful Sunday lunch, I hosted a Christmas dinner in my new mansion for my entire extended family. The same table where I'd once been humiliated. I had moved it from the old house and placed it in the center of my luxurious dining room, now surrounded by designer furniture and elegant decor. During dinner, I stood up, raised a glass of champagne, and looked into the eyes of every single person sitting around that historic table. A year ago, at this very table, I heard words that could have destroyed me. I began, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. I was called the shame of this family. And in that moment, I thought my life was over. Everyone lowered their eyes, remembering that painful day. But today, I understand that those words weren't a curse. They were the fuel I needed to discover my true strength. They were the push destiny gave me, to leave my comfort zone and chase my dreams. I raised the glass higher. Today, I raise this glass, not for revenge, but for transformation. I toast to the family who, even when they got it wrong, gave me the emotional foundation to never give up. I toast to the pain that became strength, the doubt that became determination, and the humiliation that became motivation. Tears were streaming down the faces of everyone around that table. And most importantly, I toast to the 23-year-old girl who chose to believe in herself, when no one else did. She deserves every bit of the recognition we've achieved. When I finished my speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. My mother stood and pulled me into a tight embrace. "Sweetheart," she said between sobs, thank you for teaching us that sometimes, true love has to be earned. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we had given up on you." That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat on the terrace of my mansion, staring out at the lights of Los Angeles sparkling on the horizon. I picked up my guitar, the same second-hand guitar I bought with my first paycheck from Ms. Rosa's boutique, and quietly sang, "Before He Cheats." But this time, I didn't sing with pain. I sang with gratitude. Gratitude for the journey. For the people who helped me. For the family who finally learned to see my worth. And above all, for the brave girl who had once turned rejection into resilience. 2 months later, in February 2020, I released my autobiography, Heart Evidence, From Family Shame to National Pride. The book became an instant bestseller, spending 15 consecutive weeks at the top of the charts. Thousands of messages poured in from people who saw their own story in mine, especially women who had been underestimated by their own families. One of the most touching letters came from a 16-year-old girl in Phoenix. "Emily, my family always told me I was too ugly to ever become a model. After reading your book, I applied to an agency. I got signed. I'm now working on national campaigns. Thank you for teaching me that family's opinion does not define our worth. Another letter came from a 45-year-old woman in Chicago. Emily, when I was 40, my husband told me I was too old to go back to college. After hearing your music, I enrolled anyway. Today, I'm a lawyer. I help women escape abusive relationships. Your voice gave me the courage to start over. In March 2020, when the pandemic hit, I organized a benefit live stream called Heart Evidence Live, which raised over $2 million for families in need. More than 5 million people tuned in. For 2 hours, I sang not just my own songs, but also paid tribute to every artist who had inspired me along the way. During the live stream, I shared my story again, but this time, with a global audience. Messages came flooding in from Brazilian immigrants abroad, from fans in countries that didn't even speak Portuguese but were moved by my voice, from people who saw in my journey the living proof that impossible dreams can come true. By December 2020, exactly 2 years after my transformation, I hosted a Christmas special on NBC titled Heart Evidence Christmas. It brought together the biggest stars in American music to celebrate resilience, hope, and second chances. During the show, every artist shared a personal story of overcoming adversity, inspired by my journey. The most powerful moment came when my entire family joined me on stage to sing Before He Cheats together. My mom, who, 2 years earlier, had called me the shame of the family, held the microphone right beside me, singing through tears. Right now, he's probably slow dancing with a bleach blonde tramp. But this time, the song wasn't about romantic betrayal. It was about family. About the love that was lost, and then found again. About forgiveness, and about second chances. The special was watched by 30 million people. It became the most watched Christmas broadcast of the decade. After it aired, I got a phone call that would crown everything I'd fought for, an invitation to perform at the 2021 Latin Grammy Awards, representing the United States in the Best Contemporary Pop Album category. On the day of the ceremony, in Las Vegas, as I sat backstage getting ready, my phone lit up with a video message from my family. They were all gathered at my mansion, sitting around the same table where it all started, sending me love and energy. "Sweetheart," my mom said in the video, "no matter what happens tonight, you've already won the most important award of all, the love of your family, and the respect of the entire world." I didn't win the Grammy that night, the award went to Anita, but just being there, standing on that stage, representing my country, was a victory bigger than anything I'd ever dared to dream. During my performance at the Latin Grammys, I sang Before He Cheats in both English and Portuguese. As I finished, the entire audience rose to their feet. A 5-minute standing ovation. Shakira, sitting in the front row, stood with tears in her eyes, clapping, not stopping. Backstage, after the show, I was approached by producers from across the world. I received offers for international collaborations, joint tours, and record deals in multiple countries. But the offer that moved me the most came from an international nonprofit organization that works with at-risk youth. They wanted me to become their global ambassador, to use my story to inspire teens worldwide. "Emily," said the organization's director, "your story proves that it doesn't matter where you come from, or what others say about you. What matters is what you believe about yourself." I accepted without hesitation. Today, in addition to being a singer, I am an international ambassador for a cause that has changed millions of lives, the power of dreams, and self-belief. In every country I visit, I tell my story to rooms full of young people fighting their own battles. And I always end with the same words. Don't let anyone define who you are, or what you're capable of. Not even your own family. Sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who believe in us the least, not out of malice, but out of fear. Turn that fear into fuel. Turn that doubt into determination. Turn that pain into power. Today, at 26 years old, I look back at a journey that honestly feels like it was written by a Hollywood screenwriter. But I know, every tear, every humiliation, every lonely night, was real. And it was necessary to become the person I am today. The girl who was once called the shame of the family during a Sunday lunch is now the woman whose voice wakes America up on Monday mornings, blaring through every radio station in the country. The same voice that was once silenced by cruelty is now amplified by the gratitude of millions who found in my songs the soundtrack to their own redemption. And the most beautiful part of it all is that my family, the same family that once rejected me, is now my greatest source of love and support. They've learned, sometimes you have to almost lose someone to truly understand their worth. Every night, before I go to sleep, I say a prayer of gratitude. I thank the pain for teaching me strength. I thank the rejection for teaching me independence. I thank the humiliation for teaching me humility. And most of all, I thank the love I learned to have for myself when no one else believed in me. Because at the end of the day, this is the most powerful evidence of all. When you truly believe in yourself, the whole world conspires to make your dreams come true. And when that happens, you realize it was never about revenge. It was always about self-love, resilience, and the courage to write your own story, even when the whole world tells you it's impossible. Today, my voice isn't just on the radio in my hometown. It's on the radio across the country. Across the continent. Across the world. And every note I sing is living proof that impossible dreams are only dreams that haven't yet met the person determined enough to make them real. This is my story. This is my evidence. This is my sweetest revenge, proving that the girl who was once rejected had within her the power to conquer the entire world. In December of 2022, 5 years after that Sunday lunch that changed everything, I threw a huge birthday party at my mansion to celebrate turning 27. I invited not only my family but everyone who had been part of my journey, Mr. Clark, Ms. Rosa, Claudio Anderson, Fernanda Lewis, Rafael Sanchez, and hundreds of other professionals who had played a role in my career. But the guest of honor was an 82-year-old man in a wheelchair who had traveled all the way from Washington, D.C., just to be there. His name was Mr. Anthony, a fan who had written me a letter back in 2020 saying my music helped him overcome depression after losing his wife. "Miss Emily," he said, holding my hand with his trembling fingers, "you saved my life. When I thought there was nothing left. I heard it before he cheats on the radio, and realized I still had reasons to live." During the party, we did something symbolic, something I'd been planning for months. We brought in the original wooden table, the same table where everything began, and placed it at the center of the grand hall. But this time, instead of a simple Sunday lunch, it hosted a gourmet banquet prepared by the country's top chef. As everyone sat down, I stood up and asked for a moment to speak. 5 years ago, at this table, a 23-year-old girl was humiliated. Rejected by her own family. And today, at this very table, a 27-year-old woman celebrates a career that surpassed every possible dream. I looked at every face around that table, faces that had loved me, rejected me, rediscovered me, and stood by me. But do you know what's the most incredible part? It's not the success. It's not the awards. It's not the global recognition. The most incredible thing is that I turned the greatest pain of my life into the greatest source of joy. I raised a crystal champagne glass, so different from the simple mugs we'd once used 5 years ago. I toast to the table that brought us together in pain, and now reunites us in joy. I toast to the family who taught me that sometimes true love has to be earned. And I toast to the dreams that once seemed impossible, and now stand as living evidence that anything is possible when you refuse to give up on yourself. As everyone raised their glasses, the sound of them clinking together echoed through the hall like a symphony of redemption. And in that moment, I realized my journey had come full circle. Not because I'd achieved fame, but because I'd found something far more valuable, the inner peace of someone who transformed her deepest weakness into her greatest strength. And so, the girl who was once called the shame of the family during a Sunday lunch became the woman whose voice wakes up America every morning, reminding the world that no matter how dark the night gets, there will always be evidence that a new day is rising. Because sometimes, the most powerful evidence of what we're capable of only appears when we're forced to believe in ourselves against all odds. And when that happens, we discover that we were always so much bigger, so much stronger, and so much more powerful than anyone, including ourselves, ever imagined we could be.